start with this very select group we have at the end of the afternoon. Thank you very much for coming. I'll just jump straight in and sort of introduce myself as well a bit. So I'm Kirstie. I have been working actually in sustainability for nearly 30 years now. So a really long time. I've been through an awful lot of industry sectors in that time, electronics, FMCG, and now I'm working for Pepco Group, which is this selection of retail banners, as you see. So I'll talk a little bit about Pepco Group in case you are not so familiar with them. I think you probably, if you're here in the UK, you're probably quite familiar with Poundland, but our other retail groups, and if you're in Eastern Europe, you'll be very familiar with Pepco. They're a very big brand over there. So today I'm really going to be talking about, so I have spent a lot of time over the last few years learning to speak finance. Okay, and because a lot of the regulation is now aimed at the financial institutions, which is then coming down to the CFO. And so that's why I sort of called my title, like, how do you engage your investors and how do you make friends with your CFO through sustainability? So this is not necessarily a completely supply chain conversation, but is more of a ESG, okay, where is it all going? I do tend to speak a bit fast, so I'm sorry, I will try and slow down a bit, and the regulation is really complicated as well. So just like if I start talking nonsense and in my own little language, just like say, just, okay, stop, because it happens. Okay, this is an interactive session. I will be asking you questions. It can just be a show of hands, don't worry, I'm not going to test you at the end. Or I might, you never know. So just, I thought this is the end of the afternoon. So this is an introduction to Pepco Group. As I said, we are 5,000 stores now. This was from our annual report. Sorry about the screen clip, it was not great. You can see where we are with the different retail banners. 48,000 employees, 57 million customers a month, 80,000 SKUs. It is a very big business. Every time I walk into a shop and think about Scope 3, it totally freaks me out because we're selling everything from Halloween masks through to batteries, through to snack food and everything else. I mean, really, seriously, everything else in between. And I'll be honest, within this room, there's not a lot of control on the buyers about what they actually buy. So they can just pick anything they fancy. And so I have no idea what's going to turn up next month in the store. And so it's really quite interesting from that perspective. And we're at a very early stage in our sustainability. Everybody wants to do the right thing. And there's a number of reasons for in that. And I'll talk about the regulatory aspect of it. But, you know, we also want to do the right thing. All right, our customers perhaps are not walking in with sustainability, even perhaps in their top 10 lists of reasons to be in a Poundland or a Pepco. They may well be there because their budget really doesn't allow them to shop elsewhere. But what I truly believe in and what I really want to drive through to the company is what I call the democratization of sustainability. You should be able to live a more sustainable lifestyle irrespective of the budget that you have to spend on things. And it's our job as a discount retailer to help people do that. I think, you know, Poundland, we sell a lot of snack food, a lot of FMCG type stuff. In our other stores in other countries, it's mostly homeware and clothing. So there's a very big, and you get mixes of various things, but that's sort of the mix there. Okay, so we talk about stakeholders, so let's move outside the company a little bit. Why do you think ESG stakeholding, matters, or why does ESG reporting matter to stakeholders? It's a question for the room. Just, I'm not going to hand around a mic. So, yeah, costs. Yeah. So that's the investors thinking about cost. Yeah.
I mean, investors have got targets on their portfolios in terms of ESG metrics.
That's right.
And so they have to meet those targets.
Yeah.
Just how the incentives are stacked up.
Yeah.
So it translates into money very simply.
Fantastic. You can come up and do that bit of the presentation. Thank you. Anything else? So really, I'm just doing a very short summary here. Investors are interested in things like due diligence. Are you creating a risk for me? Will we find child labour in your supply chain? And therefore, all your customers will walk away from you. So I'm talking about ESG in a very broad sense here. They're also looking at us from a competitive perspective. How are we sitting with our competition group? And, you don't have to be a leader everywhere, you can't afford to fall behind the pack. So we talk at work about being in the peloton. Okay, we don't need to win the race, but we've got to be in the peloton, and because we can't afford to fall off the back of it, even if we are a discount retailer. It is about that risk management that we talk about, and it's also about compliance from a financial institution perspective, and of course it's the return on their investment in us. Are they going to make the money that they think they're going to be making from us? For employees, it's about pride, right? I'm pretty sure that you all recognize that within your companies. It is a lot about pride in the company. Nobody really wants to work for a company where they feel that the company is doing the wrong thing. And it then becomes quite difficult to retain, either attract and retain key talent that you're looking for. Engagement. Sustainability often comes with lots of really great stories, which bring life in. And so you can talk to your employees about engagement. And then it's really about focus and then driving that activity. Customers, brand reputation, of course. Transparency can improve your credibility, adds to your brand loyalty. Companies where I was at before, Diageo and Hewlett Packard, we really did, particularly on that B2B space for HP, it was very much about driving that customer loyalty. People are famously not very loyal to their IT provider. And so you're always looking for how do we drive that connectivity with our big B2B customers on that front. And then regulators, there is a vast amount of regulation coming in this space, and I'll try and unpack some of that for you. I'm not going to be able to get through everything. And as the lady at back said, particularly what is coming at financial institutions, and then helping us understand, either from supply chain management or from sustainability management, why these questions are coming. Because I think that's quite important to be able to engage with your CFO and say, like, why? Why are they asking me these questions? I don't get it. And, because none of the senior suite like to be caught by surprise. And, those are some of the things I've learned along the way. So how is sustainability reporting changing? So in the past, we talked very much about our impact on the planet and on people, right? As a company, we talked about how much waste do we produce, how much water are we using, how much energy or carbon are we doing. That's what we're doing. Now what is happening, and that was called a materiality assessment. So you would go out to your stakeholder groups and say, what do you think it's important for us as a company to work on from a sustainability perspective? Now there is this concept of double materiality, which has only really just been brought in the last 18 months. And that then takes both that inside out, what is our impact on people and the planet, to also what is that climate change and social disruption, what is that impact on us, and how does that financially impact us? So not only do you have this is what we cost the earth, if you like, in terms of resources that we use and the waste we create and the pollution we make, but also what does that then impact on us? And that now is the starting point of all of the pieces of regulation coming, is this double materiality. So in whatever job you work in your companies, I can pretty much guarantee that there will be some really odd left field questions that will come from this type of place. It's like, so what do you think climate change's impact is going to be on us financially? So I think from a supply chain perspective, we can think straight away about storms and flooding and that type of disruption, right? That's quite easy things to think about. Then there are things, so for example, when I was at Diageo, we were thinking very much about crop growth pattern changes. A lot of wheat, a lot of barley, a lot of other grains, and then some of the special stuff like Madagascan vanilla, juniper berries for gin. All of these types of things, these quite specialist flavorings that company uses as well. What's the disruption there? And at HP, we learned this very early on. So if you remember back in, I think was it 2006, the tsunami? Something around then, wasn't it? A long time ago. That tsunami basically wiped out a clean room factory that made 75% of the world's hard disk readers. So inside on a hard disk, there's like a little finger that comes out and reads like an old-fashioned stylus on a record player. That factory, that clean room factory, made pretty much all of them for everyone. And you can imagine in the electronics sector, we were so heavily disrupted by it. prices went through the roof. You could sell them again. If you decided, well, we don't need them right now, we were selling them because we had a big stock of them. Other companies literally ground to a halt. And so, you know, you can't prevent a tsunami from happening, all right? That is a natural phenomenon. But these other types of issues become quite significant quite quickly within a company. And so it is this double materiality, thinking about what is that impact. And so I think if you work in supply chain, then you will get these questions. And people need you to think in a very, very wide way about it. So thinking a little bit about financial institutions and going back to those investors. First of all, they see a lot of opportunity. Again, notwithstanding what the Labour Party have now said about their future manifesto today, there is a lot of opportunity here. There's a lot. You think about the Inflation Reduction Act that came into the US, 300 billion, wasn't it? Something like that. I don't know, 30 billion. Can't remember the number. Lots of money. Anyway, is really beginning to grow a lot of those green technologies in the US. And then the EU suddenly went, oh, hang on a second. We need something like that. And so the EU is now doing something in that way. And so is China. China now makes almost 90% of the world's solar panels. So we're all used to thinking about China as they're the dirty guys. They're still on coal. That's not going to be the case. And they're going to sell us all of that technology in the future. So I think investors see massive opportunities within this. And you can see, you know, that I've got some of the ones here about green bonds. And I'll talk a little bit about green bonds. So the company I work for now, our sustainability program was not mature enough for us to issue a green bond. And the investors said, no, you need to go away and think about it again. Green bonds do actually have lower cost within them. And so, you know, and it's a whole sector of the finance that we weren't able to access. And these will come more and more and more, as you said, because financial institutions have targets on them now about how much of their portfolios actually is linked to sustainability and green outcomes or socially responsible outcomes, depending on the emphasis they place. What are the risks that financial institutions see? There's a big long list here. So risk of losing target assets in segments in non-sustainable industries. We're going to have to chop you off because you're still a dirty industry, and we can't be in that anymore because we can't have that percentage of our portfolio. Obviously, the reputation issue, even banks. So again, an example: Pepco Bulgaria was applying for a new bank account, and I got a questionnaire through. I'm like, why am I getting a questionnaire through from this bank? It was all sustainability, just for a bank account. Okay, so they're not investing in us. But they don't necessarily want to be associated with us if we can't even say that we have a net zero target, or that we're measuring things, or that we're addressing social risk within our supply chain. And you know, these become very fundamental very quickly to a business. And so I'm thinking, why is Treasury in Bulgaria asking me these questions? And it was like, they went, well, this is the questionnaire that the bank sent through to us. I'm like, oh, okay. It gets to brass tacks quite quickly, right? Credit risk, obviously, market risk, liquidity, insurance. These are all financial terms, right? This is not sustainability terms. This is how finance people talk to each other. And this is the language that I've been learning so that I can have proper conversations with people about, okay, we're actually talking about risk and opportunity here. And how do we build our programs around that? Yeah, I like that Barclays picture. So I'm going to talk about regulation now. The jigsaw is almost complete, I would say. It's probably not right there yet, and it's got more to go. So this will get more complicated. Why are they putting all of this financial, sort of green regulations on the finance? I think there was a switch that turned on. Like I said, I've been in sustainability a long time. You know, all of the sustainability regulation was always aimed at manufacturers. You're the dirty guys. You've got to sort yourselves out. We're going to make some laws around that. Okay, and I think what's happened now is that the EU and other regulators have realized that actually finance is the lifeblood. It is the lever for all businesses. and all institutions, to be honest with you. And so if they can change the way that finance incentivizes and is used, then they can effect that change rather than going after, oh, well, agriculture needs to do this and food needs to do this and construction needs to do this. I mean, this is a much easier way of regulating, right? You should go after the money, and we all use money. And so I think this is, you know, from their perspective, this is a very smart way of doing it now, but it's also quite scary because it then becomes part of everything. You can't get away from it. You can't say, well, the sustainability team will take care of that, because it can't. Or that, you know, supply chain will take care of that piece over there. Can't. We all have to do bits of it. So I think, you know, and I think this aspect, we come back to, again, I'm not beating up on the Labour Party, so please don't take it that way. But, you know, they're worried. People are worried because of the backlash against the ULEZ with the London Mayor about, can we actually afford all this stuff? And so, but the financial institutions, they also need to be able to show that this is not just a transition, but it's a just transition. That's a word that is used quite a lot, that we can all afford to be part of this future, this low carbon, more sustainable future. And so you see this inclusiveness coming through. And somehow as companies, we have to show that as well, is that we're not just loading on the cost and just expecting people to pay for it, but we're actually working out how to make it of value to people as well. So, can anybody name any of the EU Green Deal or Sustainable Finance Initiative regulations? Any markers for 10 on this? I'm sure you've heard of some of them along the way.
Washing directive, supply chain sustainability directive. You've got the taxonomy.
Yeah.
And CSRD is somewhere in between.
That's right. Yeah. You hit quite a lot of them. Well done. So, okay. So this is my very simplified framework, and I don't have everything on here. So what I've just looked at is the EU. I haven't then pulled it out to a market level, because one of the ones you mentioned is German specific.
It's coming for the EU.
That's right. It is. You're right.
We are in the process of ratifying very similar act to what Germany has.
That's right. At the moment, it's just for German supply chains, or if your business is big enough in Germany. And I will talk a little bit about the UK, but I'm really basing this really on how it fits together, really, from an EU perspective. So you can see that everything sits in the middle. It's called Green Deal. Quite often is like a shortcut for like a very, very long name that they've given it all on this one. And then, but what you can see really clearly is that there are things that apply to financial institutions. And there's quite a lot that applies to financial institutions. Then there are things that apply to us and our financial institutions, our investors, the banks, the pension funds that invest in our companies as well, and all those sort of things. And then there are ones that apply to companies. So I'm going to pick off a few of these and go through them. Not every one, you'll be pleased to know, because, you know, we all have homes to go to. But yeah, this is quite a significant suite of new reporting requirements, and they're either here or they're coming next year. So it's like now is the time to be able to react to it. And that's what I'm working on with the company I work for right now, and pretty much everybody else is as well. So if you haven't heard about like CSRD from your sustainability team, then you will soon, because they'll be panicking about the type of reporting that goes into it. So on these ones, so I just wanted to say how this affects a UK business. In most of these, you don't have to be listed in the EU. So the company I work for now, we are listed in the EU. So we're listed on the Warsaw Stock Exchange, we're registered in the Netherlands, and we are a large undertaking, or can't remember the thing, it's like something of public interest. It's an enterprise of public interest, EPI, that's what it's called, because Poundland is a big enough employer here in the UK. So, you know, you need to understand from your legal team actually how you're constructed as a company as to what you actually pick up. But you can see it's not very big. It really isn't. And you pick up the regulation quite quickly. If you're smaller than this, they just give you another year to think about it. So that's the way it works. It really isn't. It's coming whether you like it or not. the UK alignment with this, so what the UK, so Brexit, in my world, Brexit schmexit, it didn't happen, except that we all have more stamps in our passport when we go on holiday these days. It's a lot more of a pain. But the UK environmental regulation or sustainability regulation was one of the things that was agreed in Brexit, that we would always follow the EU. And it's a bit of a shame that it was worded like that, because I've been in sustainability a long time. The UK was actually one of the most pragmatic driving forces of environmental regulation for the EU. You know, the UK often went on and was quite sensible in its proposals. And now, unfortunately, you don't have that voice of reason that will really talk about, okay, industries need more time to digest this and think about it. But anyway, here we are. But the UK will follow all of these things. So even if you aren't, if you're not part of the EU regulation right now, it is worth thinking about it, because the UK stuff is coming. And UK investors are all involved in all of this as well. And so there are all of these sustainability disclosure requirements, is what you were talking about, all of that one's down there. That is like CSRD for the UK. And then there is the net zero transition plans. I'll talk about those and what they sort of look like. That's from a carbon perspective. And then you've got taxonomy. So you will have a UK taxonomy as well as a EU taxonomy. So yeah, it's fun days. The consultants are going to make a lot of money, let's put it that way, and so will the accountants, because all of this has to be assured. It's a limited assurance with your financial auditors, which is why the CFO is going to get very interested in this stuff. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some of them. This one, I've given all the sources at the bottom of the slides, by the way, so you can go and have a look at the larger reports. But this is from PwC. CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, is a reporting directive. So it lays out a framework. It basically says you have to report against these criteria. And then this is PwC's sort of like list of things that you need to be thinking about in order to get ready for it. So in most cases, the timeline on this is that it came into force in November last year. This is the year you get to get ready for it. And in 2025, you will report on your financial data from F24. Okay? So wherever your year started or stopped, my F24 started back in October. So I won't be reporting immediately in 2025, but I will be reporting in, let's say, our FY26 annual report against all of these. So I've got to get the F24 data up and ready, and the process is up and ready, so that in 18 months' time, we can push hopefully, I'm a very optimistic person, I can push the button and all the reports come out. That's the plan. But you can see that it covers everything, all right? It really is very, very built into how a company runs itself. Governance, policies, reporting, audit, talking to your board, all of this all the way around. It really doesn't leave a stone unturned within your organisation. So I hopefully, I can see it's like panic places, but it's okay. One rock at a time, I promise. So that's CSRD. What you get off the back of that is then, I'm trying to think what my next slide says actually. Oh yeah. So in CSRD, I've got this slide. I don't think I put it in, sorry. But basically CSRD, it sits there as it's the regulation that says you must do this. And then what sits underneath it is a whole set of standards called ESRSs, which are environmental, I never get it quite right. Environmental reporting, it can't be environmental reporting standards, something like that. And then there are a suite of those. There's about 8 of those, okay? And so then you have to go back into your organization and think, okay, what is most material? Remember we talked about that double materiality? That's the first thing you have to do for CSRD. Then you would say, okay, our stakeholders think that carbon or climate change is the most important thing for us to work on, or social responsibility in our supply chain, or water, or biodiversity. It depends what sort of organization you are. You would then look at the standards and say, okay, which ones do I need to pick against those material topics? So again, you don't have to do all 8 all in one go, but you do need to be picking them across. This PwC report is quite good and really does talk all the way through all of that stuff. So, but I would say be very pragmatic about how you structure that. Be very clear that so for example, on my materiality assessment, none of our stakeholders said biodiversity or water was important to us. Now it is. We sell a lot of cotton clothing, and we sell a lot of chocolate and other snack food, right? Other food. And so clearly we do have an impact on water and biodiversity, but I can make the case within our annual report that my materiality does not show this. I recognise its importance and we will get to it. Okay, so I'm just giving myself a little bit of runway in there and being quite pragmatic about it. Within those standards also, in each standard, there is something like, I'm just going through it at the moment, something like between 100 and 200 data points that you're supposed to report against. Again, you can be pragmatic about which ones you pick out. I am not going to pick out animal testing, okay? It's there, but I'm not going to be picking out animal testing, although we do sell products which clearly will have some impact around animal testing. But our colleague there who works for Avon, he would be picking the animal testing one before I will. So again, you have to be quite pragmatic, and I would say start small and have your explanations about why you're starting small. And, say, I recognise these issues and we'll get to them. Because otherwise we can't eat that mountain all in one go. Seriously, cannot do it all in one go. And I'm hoping that the regulator will be quite pragmatic in this regard. So, I'm hoping the auditors will be nice to us as well around this. So that is a reporting directive, which the standards sit below. You don't have to make it all up yourself. You just have to design quite a pragmatic approach around it. Okay, so taxonomy was mentioned. So taxonomy is a classification system. So this very, very much speaks to your financial institutions that are connected to you. So what they have is a target on them to say that by a certain date, they have to have a certain amount of their portfolio. It's like 50%. So they have to have a certain amount of their portfolio that is associated with sustainable activities, okay? Which is why there's a lot of pressure on oil and gas at the moment, because obviously that's not an overly sustainable business from a carbon perspective, but they make a lot of money, right? So, investment organisations are going to have to, and pension funds are going to have to balance that out a little bit. But this taxonomy reporting, I've now done 2 of them, so for 2022 and 2023. So if you're not doing it already, you probably need to be thinking about it. I spent a lot of time talking to supply chain about CapEx, okay? For us in Poundland, Pepco, what I counted in here was the trucks, the gas-powered trucks that we had bought, the doors that we had put on the refrigerators. So if you go into a Poundland now, you'll see that there's a door on the front of the refrigerators, much more energy efficient than having open refrigerated shelving. We also have talked about the recycled material that we have in some of our packaging and some of our products. And then also we're part of an organisation called Better Cotton, which is all about managing both the social and the environmental responsibility around cotton production. And so I was able to then say, okay, we bought this much better cotton, aligned cotton, and to put in our T-shirts and the kids' clothes and all that sort of stuff. And then that's part of that as well. Also put in things like putting solar panels on top of our DCs, the energy efficiency, smart meters, energy efficient aircon, all of these other things that we put in. You can also put in the energy efficiency consultancy services. So again, there's this huge list of things that you can go into, and the EU has this calculator for it as well. So I will just say, my goal is to have finance do this. All right, so I will work out what needs to happen in this space, but from my perspective, this is financial reporting. All right, it might have a lot of green words around it, but it's financial reporting. And therefore, I have to make sure that finance understand what they're doing and then give it to finance for them to do. Now, I've done it now twice myself, and I'm going like, hey guys, I'm not an accountant. I don't have access to the general ledger. I think this needs to sit with someone in a finance organisation, not me. because you'll do a lot better job with a calculator than I will. I might make mistakes, and that would be disastrous for everybody. I'll go away and work on carbon emissions. So again, I think this is somehow about being smart, about who does what within an organisation. And I think, often, if you're in sustainability or if you're in supply chain, we can be the repositories of a lot of stuff that everyone else goes, oh, I don't know what to do about this. This sounds like something you might be taking care of. And so I think you do have to be quite smart about all this regulation and dealing with it and how we move forward on it. So I know there's a lot of words. Sorry about all the words on the slide. Anyone have any questions about that? I thought I'll stop there because it's a lot to digest. And like I said, I do talk a bit fast, sorry. I'm quite excited. I've just got to a point where I understand this. I haven't done it yet, but I do understand it. I understand what to do now, and I have to sort of break it down into pieces to do.
Halfway through.
Yeah, it is hard. It really is hard. And the other thing I would recommend, I had a great conversation with like an investor analyst last week, and she really helped me to understand. She was asking, so what is your approach to taxonomy? And I sort of explained. She said, because we've talked to other retailers and they're doing this, this, and this. And I was like, oh, okay, I could do that too then. And so, do you know what I mean? I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to share knowledge, both across businesses and also among communities, because everybody's trying to work this out, right? And I report to the CFO, I certainly don't want to be in his bad books because he's getting a load of the shit questions from people. So I really want to say, okay, we've sort of worked out a pragmatic approach to it, and this is what I think is the right thing to do, so that when he talks to investors or he talks to the banks, then he's got the right sort of stuff to say. So that's that one. Okay, anyone heard of the carbon border adjustment mechanism? Yes. So if you import stuff from outside the EU and you import it from countries that don't have an emissions trading scheme, that's what ETS, can't remember where ETS here. Okay. So we have one in the UK. We have an ETS in the UK because it's sort of
Trading system, right?
emission trading system, exactly. So basically, for those I'm not going to get all the numbers right, but basically there are sectors that particularly come out, which are, you can see, are high energy intensive sectors. And then there are also, if you have so when I was at Diageo, we had a couple of sites that were over 10 megawatt sites. Okay, the big breweries, the big distilleries. And so if you're over a 10 megawatt site, you have to be part of the UK ETS or the European ETS. So that basically means if you don't work on how to reduce those carbon emissions coming off your big sites, i.e. swapping from, let's say a coal-fired boiler to a gas or an electric boiler, then you have to pay like a tax, in effect, is what it is. It's a tax. And so if you're importing products, which as a retailer, we import a lot of products into the EU, 88% of our products comes from Asia. And so some of those countries have ETS systems which are of the right level for the EU, and some of them have nothing. And so we will end up paying the tax, the differential. Because what they're trying to do, you can see it's a tax on imported goods, it's a carbon tax, which is really trying to balance up that you may be paying more. We were talking about this in our round table. So you may be paying more for a local source or nearshored activity, but by the time you've added the carbon tax in from your outsourced or out of the EU stuff, it begins to come up to parity. So this is where this regulation starts crossing borders in a huge way. And this year, what you have to do is you have to say how much product are you importing from countries that don't have a equivalent ETS, emissions trading scheme, and then from next year, you'll have to put the numbers around it and have to start paying the money. So I'm a retailer, right? I'm not in any of those sectors. However, we sell things like keychains, which have steel loops on them. Hideous. So I have to go through those 80,000 SKUs and go, okay, what of those do we have and how much do they weigh? And I don't know about you, but my bill of materials is nowhere near this capable at the moment to be able to say this. So I can't separate. So let's say you've got a key ring with a steel ring and a big plastic heart on it, or a big plastic initial. I can't separate those two things. So I have to take the weight of the whole product at the moment. All right. So again, you know, it comes back to all this supply chain stuff around bill of materials, understanding what your suppliers are giving you, having the decent records so that you can make those calculations going forward on the separate components. And I'm pretty sure, knowing the way these regulations go, it starts here and it will just pick the list of involved industries will just continue, right? So I think, again, in my view, this is a finance. And I've already started saying, okay, you finance people, you have to do this calculation, right? Because it's a tax. And I don't pay taxes. I haven't got budget to pay tax. I don't manage the processes to pay tax. You know, that's not my organization. So I will help them work out what to do, and then they will make the calculation. But the supply chain connectivity, bill of materials, PLM systems, all that type of stuff, it's all in there. So, yeah. It's fun, this, isn't it? Okay. So climate or net zero transition plans. So this is the UK is a bit further advanced on requiring what they call a net zero transition plan or a low carbon or climate transition plan. There's a couple of different names. And so again, this is aimed at financial institutions, and we're seeing them come up in the US as well. So financial institutions who are a bit less pro ESG in the US than they are in Europe, but it is coming. And so really it sets out, you know, for financial institutions, it said, it addresses the challenge of transition finance. So they have to answer the question, how much have you currently got in oil and gas or high carbon, steel, cement? How much you currently invested in those industries, and where is it going over time to get us out to 2050? And everybody has to produce these. And so, you know, if you think about your financial institutions that are doing this, these are the questions that they will be asking you. Like, where's your transition plan? And if you're in one of those high carbon, high energy industries at the moment, really need to be working hard on this stuff now. And it might still say, okay, well, we don't know what to do. So again, I was at Diageo. We thought that hydrogen would be a future. Don't know when that infrastructure is going to come online. Okay, so there was a piece that we went, okay, well, we'll get back to that in 2035 when there's more infrastructure and more industry and we'll know more about it. So you don't have to have everything all the way down, but you do need to, like this example, you do have to sort of like lay out, okay, this is approximately what we think is going to happen and when. And then you'll have to show, okay, what investments have you made into that? Does your investment match up to your target? I met one of these analyst rating houses the other day, last year, and I found it quite scary, to be honest with you, because what they did is they looked at financial statements from a company and they said, does your financial statement, which talks about your investment, both in CapEx and OpEx, match your climate transition ambition or stated goals? And nobody, not even Unilever, was saying that they would invest enough to meet their net zero goals. And so, like, they're gold standard, right? Unilever in this space. And so I found that quite a scary amount of analysis that's going into this, is that these financial houses are really using their own mechanisms to actually judge us and say, are you doing enough? And at the moment, most people are not, in their view. Okay. And like I said, the UK is slightly ahead of it. So the FCA is already sort of ramped up on all of this stuff. And again, this is very finance-oriented, really finance-oriented. And they are treating it like financial planning and financial analysis and reporting. Okay. So, how does this all connect to my job, my day job in supply chain? So I'll try and sort of unpack it a little bit for you. I think we've talked about some of it. So Does anyone want to like have a bash at it now? I've said some of the things, and I've tried to do a summary on the next page. You might have some other ideas as well. You look so scared. I'm really sorry.
Because it's currently the topic.
Yeah, it is a scary topic. I agree. So this is. I'm sorry about the Dilbert rip-off. It doesn't come out very well. But basically, it's data. Hey. And this conference has been about digitization, data, AI, and about sustainability. And I think now it sort of understand why those two things come together, because it's all about the data. So, and about the reporting and what comes from your suppliers, what comes within your supply chain and all your logistics and all those other things and your products. Record keeping, because this is now, because of CSRD, if you remember, that requires a limited assurance on all of your ESG KPIs. Auditors demand traceability. It's got to go back to source data. So this last time round, we did like a trial audit with one of the big four, and basically they said you failed. And I said, yes, I know we were going to fail, but I want you to show me exactly where. And one of our biggest issues was about traceability. So I could say, okay, this is how much fuel we use in our trucks. They wanted to see the fuel cards, the actual fuel cards. And not just talk to the logistics manager, but they wanted to get down to that level. And, that we found that quite difficult to support across all of our markets. And so I think this is, be ready for this type of stuff coming through. It is, and I'm sure your systems are much more mature than where I work at the moment, but but be ready for it. Engage suppliers. We haven't really talked about the 3 scopes. We didn't have enough time in this one, but that scope 3 is in there as well. So you can't just look at what you do, you have to look at all of what your suppliers do. So really engaging scope 3 decarbonisation, the emissions data, and again, that transparency. It's not just what your supplier says on like a questionnaire that you send, a survey that you send them, unfortunately. Managing risk, right? That's what supply chain does, is manage risk. But there's more risk that is perceived. And this week I went to a risk seminar at our insurers. And our insurance premiums will increase if we cannot manage the risk from this. And so this is very financial. And maybe you're already having these conversations with your treasury about insurance, but they will come asking you about it if you're not already having those discussions with them. And I think, we talked about green bonds and improved access to finance. That's a lot within our gift within supply chains to be able to help with that access to green bonds. And we are a key part of developing and implementing a net zero transition plan. There's a lot of decision-making capability that sits within supply chain to be able to do this. What energy are we buying? What logistics are we using? How are we driving our suppliers? How are we working on packaging and waste? All of these things, they all sit within there. Are we managing social risk within our supply chain? There's a lot that sits within the supply chain organisation. And then, the other things at the bottom, which I'm sure you know about anyway, that supply chain managers are get involved in access to new markets, cost savings and circularity. That's one of those standards that I talked about for CSRD. There is one about resources and about circularity. So they want us to always start reporting on, okay, not just are we sending out, but what are you bringing back? And where's that recycled content and all that sort of stuff? That is a big sourcing job. When I was at HP, we really struggled to source the amount of recycled plastic, the hard engineering plastic that we said that we were going to put into our products. And that was because it's ABS, and the car industry were using it for car bumpers. Now, they were buying considerably more, because there's a lot more plastic in a car bumper than there is in a PC or a printer. And so we really struggled. They also didn't care about what colour it was, because they're just going to spray it, right, whatever colour your car is. Whereas we were quite much more specific about the technicality, the structural integrity of the plastic and the colour of it. So again, you start competing against totally different sectors when it comes to recycled content. And you might know that already. So, and then there's the regulatory compliance. So just to finish up, things that I have learned in my journey so far into this alphabet soup of finance and sustainability, ESG. is learn the language of finance. Seriously, I to understand what these people are talking about. They speak a totally different language as well, finance people, and particularly corporate finance, all right? And I've had to learn all of that type of stuff. This is part of like understanding those different asks of financial stakeholders and regulators, because otherwise the questions are so odd. I'm not joking. You think, why? Why is Treasury in Bulgaria asking me this question about a net zero plan? I have no idea. What do you need to know that for? Oh, it's because the bank wants to know. Oh, okay. Make friends with your CFO and the finance team because these are the different places that I'm talking to. Corporate accounting for the general ledger to match that taxonomy piece of it. What of our CapEx can we say is sustainability aligned? What can we say is sustainability eligible? All of those things. Treasury for debt and banks and all of those sorts of things. And then investor relations for the equity conversations. I've had quite a few. We've had quite a lot. I've dealt with investor relations a long time, and there have been a lot of investors coming and talking, and more every year, asking about what are you doing in this space. And when they ask the CFO or the CEO and they don't have an answer, that's when it all flows back down, right? To people like us who have to find the answers to these things. I think, get ahead of their asks and align your approaches. Otherwise, it creates a lot of churn inside. It's really inefficient trying to scrapple around for this information. And purely from a purchasing perspective or procurement perspective, really think about that taxonomy. That's what I'm asking at the moment is how does our general ledger and our procurement practices help us to do that reporting better? So are we identifying where we're spending that money and that we can tag it, flag it, I don't know what to do to it, but can we identify it so that we don't then have to trawl through? That's what I had people doing last year, was trawling through invoices, because what we were getting for, let's say, a store fit out, we were getting electrical services. Okay, well, how much of that was consulting and how much of that was actual equipment that went into that store? And of that equipment, was it of the right rating? Was it like A-rated or AA rated or whatever it had to be? And it wasn't there. And so I wasn't able to do the reporting all the way along because we hadn't captured that information up front. But these guys don't know it, and then they'll come and ask you, and you'll go, oh, I didn't ask that of my supplier, so you didn't have it. And then really it's about, and I haven't touched on it at all really, is about social responsibility and that nature biodiversity. That's all coming as well. Yay. So that's me. That's been my sort of like my last year of journey into the world of finance and sustainability. Like I said, I know sustainability really well. This has been a massive learning curve for me in terms of understanding finance and then really thinking about, okay, how do we operationalize that internally? And a lot of it comes back to things that supply chain as an organization does. And so that's why I talked to you about it. So I think we're out of time, but I'm very happy to take questions and I'm going to be here afterwards. So thank you very much. Thank you.